Welcome to another episode of the Leading Life Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Zook, and here is where we're going to talk about helping you become a stronger leader in all aspects of your life. All right, here we go. Right now, on today's episode, we're going to talk about how ego destroys great leadership. Welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here. Let's build stronger leadership together today on the Leading Life Podcast, where we talk about what it takes to grow, lead, and live with purpose. I'm your host, Andy Zook, and each episode is designed to give you simple, real-world tools to help you show up as your best self in work and in life. You know, I started this podcast because I truly care about the people that work in our businesses and the leaders who lead them. So I'm here to share what I've learned from over 35 years of leadership, coaching, mentoring, and motivating teams. My examples and lessons are from on the job, from life, and my own personal growth. So I'm here to help you build confidence, clarity, and courage. So if you like what you're hearing, please hit subscribe and so you won't miss another episode. All right, let's get into it. Yeah, let's go. What we're going to talk about today is the quiet killer of great leaders. Yeah. Have you ever watched a truly talented leader slowly lose the room? You know, it never happens in one moment. It happens quietly in those subtle ways. They stop listening and the team's ideas start to shrink. And then all of a sudden, everyone becomes cautious, careful, or even worse, more guarded. And the leader almost never sees it happening because ego blinds us. I've seen this. I've seen it in organizations. I've seen it in leaders that I greatly admired. The moments where they tried so hard to be the one who had all the answers is where they forgot the job isn't to be right, but it's to get it right. And ego is the great destroyer of leadership, but humility, well, that's the opposite. That's the great builder of people and teams. So today, we're going to talk about what ego looks like, why it happens, and how great leaders can avoid the fall. So ego isn't loud. Ego isn't someone pounding their chest. Ego is subtle. It shows up in three ways. Number one, it stops leaders from hearing the truth. Yeah, when people notice you get defensive, they stop giving you feedback. And now you're leading blindly. Number two, ego makes leaders center themselves instead of the very mission they're supposed to be on. So when the story becomes about your greatness, your decisions become smaller. They become safer and more self-protective. And third, ego isolates. So when you're focused on proving you're capable, you stop being present. And connection requires vulnerability, emotional availability, and listening without rehearsing your response. That mindset pulls your attention inward, and connection only happens when attention is outward. So before long, the leader ends up alone, confused and wondering why no one steps up anymore, not realizing they accidentally created that very environment themselves. And I want to contrast how this can be by giving you two examples of leaders. We're going to start with one whose ego directly led to the ruin of his career and his company. And that's Adam Neumann. He was the co-founder and former CEO of WeWork. And they were once a darling in the startup world. They were reaching a valuation of $47 billion. And Neumann was a charismatic leader. His career ended in disgrace due to a mix of outsized ambition, erratic behavior, and an extreme self-centered ego that ultimately alienated investors and the company board. And so some of the things that he did was, number one, he had these delusional proclamations. His hubris was evident in his grand and often unrealistic visions. He once declared that his descendants would run the company WeWork for the next 300 years, and he wanted to become the president of the world, highlighting a real disconnect from reality and a focus on personal power over sustainable business growth. He also made self-serving financial deals. Neumann engaged in a number of controversial personal transactions that blurred the line between his own finances and the company's. He trademarked the term the We Company and then sold the rights to the company for nearly $6 million, an act that was highly criticized for being self-serving and a major governance red flag. He created a work culture heavily centered on his persona. And that led to a lack of accountability in an environment where mistakes were not easily questioned. The company prioritized a fast-paced hustle culture with extravagant parties and a cult-like atmosphere, which eventually proved unsustainable. And then he ignored governance and profitability. Despite the multi-million-dollar valuation, Newman consistently failed to make the company profitable, and his chaotic management style and disregard for corporate governance alarmed potential investors. And then lastly, his failed IPO and ousting. So the final downfall for him came when the company filed its S-1 document for its IPO, which revealed the extent of the financial irregularities, conflicts of interest, and Newman's dictatorial control. So investors ultimately rebelled, and the IPO was pulled, and the company's valuation plummeted. Newman's story serves as a stark reminder that while confidence is necessary for great leadership, an unchecked ego can lead to poor decision-making, a toxic culture, and ultimately the destruction of one's career and enterprise. And so what are some of the key things you saw happen there? Yep, the deals that he made were about him. He was unrealistic in speaking of the vision of the company and couldn't even get those kind of returns that he had said that he would. And the culture was about him and not the needs of his team. So that's what we kind of learned from that and Adam Newman's mistakes. The opposite example, and a great example of enduring humility, is Colleen Barrett. She was the former president and chief operating officer of Southwest Airlines. And that's an airline where her leadership lessons are widely applicable to the service and retail-focused sectors due to the emphasis on customer service and employee culture. While technically in the airline industry, Southwest operates with a strong retail and service-oriented model, focusing intensely on customer and employee relationships as its core business strategy. And Barrett's story is a powerful illustration of humble leadership in a major corporation. She began her career as a legal secretary, and then through her dedication, organizational skills, and innate understanding of people, she rose through the ranks to become the first female president of a major airline. She demonstrated that a humble start does not limit one's potential for high office. And then Barrett championed a service leadership style, where the role of the leader is to serve the employees, not be served by them. She believed that if the company treated its employees with respect and care, the employees would naturally extend the same love, which is LUV, the company's stock symbol and core value. They'll extend that to the customers. Her personal touches and empathy. She was known as the Queen of Hearts. Barrett had an incredible ability to make every employee feel valued. She remembered birthdays, anniversaries. She was sending thousands of personalized, often handwritten notes and gifts. This personal connection fostered a deep sense of loyalty and a family-like culture. She also shunned the spotlight, believe it or not. She avoided it. She preferred to focus on the operational details and the well-being of her teams. She didn't care for corporate hierarchy. She treated everyone from the baggage handlers to the executives as equals. And I love that. And then she admitted her knowledge gaps. She didn't pretend to be an expert in every aspect of a highly complex business. Instead, she humbled herself. She learned what she needed to know and crucially surrounded herself with experts in areas where she lacked expertise and empowered her teams to excel. Her approach proved that a culture built on humility, empathy, and putting people first can lead to exceptional business success. And Southwest Airlines has remained profitable for 47 consecutive years under her influence and the culture she helped build. So what can we learn from Colleen Barrett? Yeah, number one, she worked her way up through the ranks. She communicated her gratitude, demonstrated empathy, and she admitted her gaps. Not only that, she surrounded herself with great talent. So if she had a gap in something that she wasn't good at, she got someone to work with her that was. That is a great example of humility and how that connects with great leadership. Years ago, we had a leader come into our company, and I'll tell you that not only he came in with this ego, but he had an axe to grind. And that was even far more dangerous. He worked a few years in a less prominent brand. So when he came to a premier brand, he actually looked at me and said, you guys are not as great as you portray yourself. You looked down on us for years, and now I've seen you have no reason to back it up. And I remember striking me like, wow, I can't believe you said that, which wasn't true at all, because the fact that we were just coming off J.D. Power and Associates nominating us as one of the greatest places to work. But overnight, he became an egomaniac and dominated with fear, and I watched my peers react and play his game back to him. And I understood why. I mean, they were afraid to go against him. I mean, nobody wants to lose their job or their career that they've put so much time into. But he talked like he knew everything about the business, but quite honestly, he was clueless. And it cost him. We lost so much great talent, and the few people that did stay on worked in a climate of fear. Let's get into what's the psychology and neuroscience behind ego. Here's what's happening inside the leader's brain. Number one, ego is a fear response. So when the brain senses a threat like being wrong, losing status, or being overshadowed, it triggers defensive behavior. You're not arrogant, you're just protecting a fragile identity. Number two, the spotlight effect. Our brain convinces us everyone is watching, judging, measuring our worth at all times. So we overcompensate. Three, the prefrontal cortex starts to shut down. So when ego takes over, rational thinking and empathy weaken. You literally become less able to hear others. And then four, myelination works against you. You know, the habits you rehearse, the defensiveness, the needing the last word, needing to be the smartest in the room, those become automatic neural pathways. Remember, we talked about myelination before. It's the vital process where special glial cells in the brain and spinal cord wrap nerve cells and axons with a fatty myelin sheath, which dramatically speeds up the electrical signal transmission in our brains. So the good news is humility, listening, pausing, asking questions, that can rewire leadership. Ego is not your identity. It's just an old pattern you've rehearsed for too long. And that happens to many leaders. So let's talk about what great leaders do instead and the actionable steps they take. And I would preface this by saying they don't ever really kill their ego, but they just manage it better. And there's three core habits that I want to talk to you about. Number one is curiosity over certainty. You can ask things like, tell me more. What am I missing? How would you approach this? Those questions are humility in action. And so how do we do that? Well, ask open-ended questions, like I said. Rather than making assumptions or providing immediate answers, curious leaders always ask why, what if, how might we, to encourage deeper thought and exploration. They practice active listening. They listen to understand, not to respond, giving their full attention and using follow-up questions to delve deeper into others' perspectives. They also admit when they don't know. Leaders model vulnerability by saying, I don't know yet, which builds trust and psychological safety with their teams, showing that it's okay to learn and grow together. They also seek diverse perspectives. They actively engage with people from different backgrounds, industries, and disciplines to broaden their own worldview and gain fresh insights. They allocate time for exploration. Leaders intentionally carve out time for non-work related learning, such as reading books outside their field or exploring new hobbies, recognizing that varied experiences often fuel creativity. And the big one, they embrace a growth mindset. Yeah, they view setbacks and failures as learning opportunities rather than personal shortcomings. And they promote a culture where taking calculated risks is acceptable. They also challenge the status quo. I love that because curious leaders are never satisfied with, well, this is how we've always done it. They're constantly questioning existing norms and processes to uncover innovative solutions and stay ahead of trends. And then the last part is they foster psychological safety. They create an environment where team members feel safe to speak up, share ideas, and even challenge their leaders' choices without fear of negative consequences and judgment. So the second thing they do after those behaviors around curiosity is that they praise their people by name. You want a strong team? Then shine the light on others intentionally and consistently. And it's simple to do that. First, be specific and detailed. Generic praises like good job is less impactful than highlighting exactly what was well done and why it mattered. So instead of great work in the project, try, hey, the way you streamlined that complex data analysis for the Q4 report was excellent. Your attention to detail saves the team hours and helped us exceed our targets. They're also timely. Offer recognition as soon as an accomplishment or positive behavior occurs to maximize its impact and reinforce the behavior. Be authentic and sincere. Ensure your praise is genuine. Employees can easily tell if compliments are forced or insincere. And then tailor that delivery. Remember, public versus private. Some team members thrive on public recognition in a meeting or company-wide message, while others prefer a quiet one-on-one thank you or a private handwritten note. Learn what works best for each person. And then link your praise to company values. Explain how their specific effort contributed to the team's mission or the organization's broader objectives. This helps employees see how they're connecting to the bigger picture and their role within it. So the last thing for this is acknowledge effort and process. Praise the hard work, resilience, and creativity involved, not just the final result. This encourages a growth mindset and persistence through challenges. The next category is willingness to be wrong. This is a hard one because for being wrong, it threatens people's identity. If being wrong threatens your identity, leadership will always feel heavy. If being wrong expands your learning, leadership becomes a superpower. And so how we can do that better is make a clear, straightforward apology. Use phrases like, I was wrong about that strategy, or I mismanaged that situation, rather than deflecting blame or minimizing the issue. Take full responsibility. Do not blame others or external factors. A leader acknowledges that the buck stops with them, even if the mistake happened several layers down in the organization. Also, share the experience. Leaders can start a team meeting by sharing a recent mistake they made and what they learned from it. That normalizes the experience of failure as a learning opportunity. Also, focus on solutions in the future. So instead of dwelling on what went wrong, shift the conversation to the steps needed to fix the problem and prevent reoccurrence. And then lastly, reward growth. It's not just wins. Celebrate the lessons learned from failures as much as the successes. Encourage calculated risk-taking innovation. So those are the 3 actionable steps that you can take to be a more humble leader and keep the ego from taking over. Again, curiosity over certainty, praise that lifts people by name, and willingness to be wrong. All right, so here is your leadership edge for this episode. Here are 3 tools that you can use today. Take a 5-second humility pause. Before responding, ask yourself silently, am I trying to be helpful right now? Or am I trying to be right? That'll really change everything in how you speak with people. Trust me, it works. I try to keep that in mind every time I have a conversation or I'm dealing with something maybe challenging an existing way I did things. The second one is incorporating the credit transfer habit. So every time someone praises you, immediately make sure you name who actually did the work. Watch how quickly trust rises. I remember not too long ago, we had a big corporate visit in my store and I highlighted my associates before I talked about what I was working on, because it's the people on our team that are making the difference. And I wanted my corporate office to see that. And I wanted them to see how we are a people first team, essentially. And then the next one is have an ego check-in. So once a week, ask your team, what's one thing I can do differently to support you better? That's a great question. Don't defend, don't explain it. Just receive it. What's one thing I can do differently to support you better? These questions create psychological safety, and an ego cannot survive in that environment. And this is your call to arms for this episode. This is your challenge as a leader. This week, catch your ego. Not to punish it, but to understand it. Ego screams, protect yourself, where leadership whispers, serve others. One is loud, but one is powerful. Great leaders don't need the room to know they're the leader because they're too busy helping everyone else rise. So let humility be your competitive advantage. Let curiosity be your identity, and let listening be your superpower. And watch what happens to the people around you and the leader within you. All right, so that's my episode today. I hope this impacted you for the better. If you like what you are hearing, please leave me a rating or review so we can get more people to hear the Leading Life podcast, and hit that subscribe button so you won't miss another episode. And if this episode inspired you, share it with a leader who needs to hear it. And remember, the world gets better when leaders get better. Until next time, I want you to lead with purpose, live with intention, and keep becoming who you were meant to be. But most importantly, I want you to go out and be the hero of somebody's story today. All right, thanks for listening. I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.